Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. My dad will be so grateful. See you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.
Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast, a show about crafting a life you love and making work optional, using the tools of mindfulness, envisioning, and financial independence. I'm your host, Adam Coelho, and I'm so glad you're here. Each episode of the Mindful Fire podcast explores these 3 tools through teachings, guided meditations, and inspiring interviews with people actually living them to craft a life they love. At its core, Mindful Fire is about creating more awareness and choice in your life. Mindfulness helps you develop self-awareness to know yourself better and what's most important to you by practicing a kind, curious awareness. Envisioning is all about choosing to think big about your life and putting the power of your predicting brain to work to create the life you dream of. And financial independence brings awareness and choice to your financial life, empowering you to make your vision a reality by getting your money sorted out and ultimately making work optional. And here's the best part. You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to live out your vision. Mindful Fire is about using these tools to craft that life now on the path to financial independence and beyond. If you're ready to start your Mindful Fire journey, go to mindfulfire.org/start and download my free envisioning guide. In just 10 minutes, this guide will help you craft a clear and inspiring vision for your life. Again, you can download it for free at mindfulfire.org/start. Let's jump into today's episode. Cathryn, welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
That's great to be here.
Before we jump in, I just want to share with the audience a little bit about how we know each other. Cathryn and I met in 2014, I believe, when we were both part of a program called The Foundation. This was an entrepreneurship program that was really designed to help entrepreneurs build a SaaS business within 6 months. As you may have heard on the podcast, and probably will hear more, I went all in on this in terms of my effort and my mindset. For me, it had some pros and some cons. As you may have heard, I've caused me to envision myself out of a job. But that's not why we're here today. Cathryn had some better results in this program. But more importantly, it was a really awesome experience. We were in kind of a mastermind group together that I jumped into somehow. It was awesome. We have kept in touch since. It's been amazing to follow your journey as an entrepreneur, both in the program, the success you had in there, in creating Best Self company that you had built during that time and have since grown and eventually sold. It's wonderful to have you here. Really excited to jump into this conversation and hear what's going on in your life and how you think about creating a life you love. With that, welcome, Cathryn.
Yeah, it's great to be here. We've known each other for so long. I feel like we chatted for like 30 minutes and I'm like, oh, let's get to the podcast part.
Exactly. Yeah, we almost forgot about doing the podcast because we were catching up on life and everything. It is great to have you here and a long time coming. All right, Cathryn, I'd love to have you start by sharing with the audience a little bit about who you are, your journey, and what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, so I'm from Ireland originally. I moved to the US in 2012. I used to be an architect. That's how I create physical products. And then I realized architecture sucks. Once you're out of school and you're working in it, it's just like a lot of work and little pay. So I got more into personal development. I don't think I read a nonfiction book before the age of 24. Like I didn't know personal development was a thing. And one thing about the US that I love is there's a much bigger commitment to investing in yourself and the American dream per se. So I got into that and I'm like learning. Before I was not organized. I would like wake up late every day, be frazzled the whole day, trying to catch up with my life. I was like a hamster on a wheel, pretty much, and miserable. I didn't know how miserable I was until later when I was comparing. But anyway, I got more into personal development. I started to get my habits figured out and became a morning person, which I didn't know you could just decide that, but you can. And my whole life started to get better. And I'm thinking, wow, why didn't I learn about this stuff growing up? Like I didn't know this. We learn all this Pythagoras theorem and all this random stuff that we never use, but the stuff that would actually make us successful, like mastering ourselves and our habits, our emotions, and our mindfulness, that is actually what's going to make us successful. Yet there's no structure unless you go out and find it yourself. And I think there's coming into more in school now, but when I was growing up, there was nothing like that. So when I started Best Self, I didn't think it was going to be a big business. I really just was like, oh, what would I want to exist so that I don't have to read 20 books? I can just put this framework into my life and be of gratitude in the morning, like planning out my day. These like core things that I find myself doing that would help me have a better day and therefore a better life. And that's the first product, Best Self, was like, this is a product I want to exist. And I created it. It was going to be really expensive to print, like one or a few different copies of it. So I'm like, okay, let's go to Kickstarter, which I had some experience in. And that's where Best Self came from. Our goal was 15,000, which we hit in like a day and a half. And then we went on to raise like 320 something thousand on Kickstarter. And that was when I was like, wait, this could be the thing. I never thought it would be the thing. I thought it was just like a passion project. And I had other businesses going on, but that was the one I was most excited about, which is just funny because anything before I'd started the way to make money, it was the thing that I started out of a passion for it and wanting it to exist that became the thing that was the thing that worked.
Yeah, you're bringing me back to that because I remember when you did that Kickstarter and you had had a successful Kickstarter before, but this one just hit the stratosphere. I remember being like watching it and seeing 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. Oh my God, this is crazy. And then, yeah, I was a backer of that and got the journal, and it was called the Self Journal. That was the first product. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what it is.
Yeah, so the Self Journal is a 13-week journal based on setting a goal, bringing it down, and then hitting it in 3 months. Because a year is too long of a time to set New Year's resolutions. But a lot of times people forget about them by February because it's not really something that they've thought about and broken down into a meaningful action plan. It's like, oh, I want to lose weight. That's not really a goal because you lost a pound or half a pound, then technically you've hit your goal. But if you're not excited about that, that's not what you meant. Whereas if you're like, I want to lose 10 pounds by March 31st, that's something that you can track and you either hit it or you don't. And it's also a short enough time that there's no room for procrastination. Also, the world can change so quickly. For example, people had set a year-long goal in January 2020 and pandemic hits in March. It's like, oh, my goal is to travel to 25 countries. It's like, no, it's not. And so I think that
you're not leaving your house.
Right. 26 rooms, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's where it came from, of just setting up sprints for yourself. And that was the first product. So it was the first guided journal about goal setting. Now there's a lot, but at the time it was the first.
Yeah.
I still use it. You can go on Best Self and a lot of people still use it. I have a friend who bought on the Kickstarter, but he still uses it. And his stock of journals every 3 months for the past 7.5 years, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Remember you coming out with that. And I was thinking, oh, wow, this is a great idea. One, it's a needed thing, but also from a business standpoint, if it works, you keep buying them, right? And because every 3 months you need a new one and you have a goal and you go after it and you do it. So it made a lot of sense. One of the things that stood out to me about what you were saying is that you weren't a morning person. You weren't organized. This is an area for me that I've continued to struggle with. Not an organized person, did not stick to the self journal myself, still have it, probably should get back on it. But how did you make that transition? Like if you're talking to somebody who's like me, not organized, has goals, wants to fulfill their potential, what would you advise they start with?
I think the most powerful way to change your behavior is to shift your identity and think of yourself as, okay, the person I want to become, what are they doing? So future Adam, how do you show up every day that would make you proud of yourself in the future? Essentially, fulfilling your potential is becoming the best version of yourself. And so for me, it was very much like, okay, how does this person show up? I could also see what wasn't working for me. Some people in their DNA are night people and some people are morning people. So I don't think that you have to be a morning person in order to have your life together. But if the current system that you're doing is not working for you and you're not getting the results you want, you might want to try something else. And so for me, that's how it showed up. And I have ADHD. So my organization is just like, it's organized chaos. I might see something under the couch and I'm like, now I know that's there and I won't pick it up, but I will remember it's there in 4 days when I need it, which drives my wife insane. So I'm not talking about like super type A organization. It's just like, what is the system that works for you? And when you wake up, what you do during your day, like figuring out how to manage your energy and not your time. Because if you work best from 10 p.m. to like 2 a.m. and you know you're in flow, then you should actually make sure that you keep that time free. So it's really about figuring out what works for you, looking at every part of your life right now and saying, okay, I can see this is not working. Let me try something else. And then just tracking it for a bit and see if it's better. And I think breaking down like your future self and what they're doing. Are they going for a walk every day? Are they doing this? And then just trying habits in your life and seeing if the output is actually better in your day when you do that stuff.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about here, Cathryn, is self-awareness, right? First and foremost, you need to pay attention, notice what's working, what's not working. Notice when you're the most productive and when you feel the best, when you have the most energy. And then just start trying different things and knowing the effect that they have. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, actually something I did at the start of this year, I look and like there's start, stop, continue list. And I just sold my business. So I have more time to do whatever I want, which is scary and also exciting. And I'm looking at like how I'm currently spending my time. And one thing I realized that I was a negative in my life in general was I was listening to way too many true crime podcasts. And I'm thinking like at some point I want to start something else. And there's an opportunity cost of listening to this versus listening to something that like I'm not going to start a true crime podcast. So it's not like it's research related. And if I think of what I have today, it's not from what I did yesterday. It's like compounding decisions over time. And so if I'm listening to something and like feeding my brain with something that's either like a net neutral at best or a net negative, then over time, my performance will actually decline. So if you just look at little things like that, if I'm working out, should I be listening to this instead of that? And how will that change my life? And so I think you have to look at your day-to-day activities. If I did this every day for a year, would I be a better person or would I be a worse person? So every time you buy something, like an Xbox, and you're like, if I use this every day for the next year, am I going to be better or worse? If you're a professional gamer, you're probably going to be better. But if like you're using that to procrastinate against starting something, then you might be worse or worse off. And so I try to look at whether it's like consumption, things I'm buying, reading, watching as like, okay, if this compounds on itself, am I better off or worse off? And then that's a general filter with how I work now.
It's almost like those things are investments, right? They're like in compounding investments in yourself. I try to think about habits as investments.
Yeah.
But I sometimes get derailed. But I think it's a really good way to think about it, right? Because it does compound, right? Like if you listen to the news every day, you're probably not going to be better off than if you listen to like a self-improvement podcast, for instance. And so those things compound on themselves, as do the actions that you take. And yeah, so I think that makes a lot of sense. I also really like what you were saying about the person you want to be, right? The person you'd be proud of becoming either in 5 years or 10 years or at the end of your life, whatever it may be. And like, what are their habits? How do they feel? How do they show up? And that gets back to a thing I talk about all the time, which is envisioning. I haven't really thought so much about it in the way you described it, of like, what type of person is that? I think about more of the circumstances and the achievements and the lifestyle. But the thing that's going to get you there is the type of person that you are and that you want to become. So I think there's really something to that.
Yeah. And I think apparently everyone thinks they're going to be a millionaire at some point.
Yeah, that's why they vote for people who cut taxes.
Yeah. They're like really worried about that inheritance tax. Like, dude, you have $26, you're dead. But I think we always think like, oh, in the future, I'm going to be like this. And the best predictor of like your future is actually your past and what you have been doing. And so I actually think that's something that I realized was only reading business books for years and years. I was so focused on personal development, and that showed up in my success in business. But then my relationship wasn't good. So then I'm like focused on that. And so I think there's different seasons of your life, but I do think you have to walk out you here won't get you there. And so sometimes like, oh yeah, maybe don't read only business books. Like you can read fiction. Like you can actually read for fun. You don't have to learn something every time. And then that slips a little because then suddenly I went from listening only to personal development to like listening to murder podcasts all the time. And I'm like, oh, we slipped a little too far there. And so you have to just constantly be balancing and seeing the different seasons and making sure that you're focused on the right thing. And then you don't have to completely change your personality overnight, but it's just like small little tweaks that over time, again, will compound just like your money into you being a different person. And one day you'll wake up and you won't even recognize like who you were before. I think one of the biggest things for me is I had a baby a year ago and I'm like, oh, what am I going to teach my daughter? It's like the best teacher and the thing that they're going to notice is like how you show up. Like you can talk to your red in the face about what you think they should do, but they're actually just going to mirror what you do. And so now I'm more focused on how am I showing up as a good example is actually the most powerful sort of why there is, because you want to set a good example for your kids. And by you showing up how you want them to show up, it's like much more motivating than just like, oh, what's the best version of myself? It's like, oh, what is my kid going to see in 10, 20 years that I can start today?
Yeah, that really hits me. That really hits me. And it's easier said than done for sure, especially around like 6 p.m.
Yeah.
When it's like, all right, let me get this kid eating, going in the bath, going to bed, and he wants none of it. But you're absolutely right. Like, especially now that my son is 4, it's like the way that I show up, which is not that mindful a lot of the time. Let's be real. Basically, he reacts, right? Him and I ratchet each other up and it's not very useful, but it's hard to stop in that moment and really catch myself. But I think that it is a practice to come back to again and again. And it's so important because you're right. Like he's going to mirror, he's already mirroring what I'm doing. And if I say something to him, he's going to say it back to me. Like the other day, I'm like, that's disrespectful. Like be respectful. And then now he's like, you're being disrespectful. I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't think you understand what this means, but it's my fault. I said it to you. Like that's on me. Right. So it's from the things you say, but it's like you said, it's completely how you show up, your way of being, how you handle things, way more important than what you say. Because as I was saying before we started recording, he doesn't listen to anything I say. So trying to tell him what to do, probably not the best approach. Yeah. I think that it really starts with habits, right? Thinking about habits as investments in your future self, having a clear vision of how you want to show up, the person you want to become, the identity piece. A book that goes into this topic a lot is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I imagine you've read that a couple of times, but you need to think about what's the identity you want to have. And then what do you say? Every habit is an investment in your future self.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other advice on building habits that have been successful for you or that you've seen as you've built your business?
I think that James Clear talks about this as well, as the idea of creating an environment cohesive with the person that you want to be. So for example, we just moved into a new house in January, and our old house, when we had the baby, we turned the baby room from my office into a baby room, which is fine. But what I realized, like, I like getting up early. Like I said, I'm a morning person. My wife does not like getting up early at all, nor does she like me getting up early because God forbid I would make coffee and wake her up. And so our old house, like the kitchen was right next to our bedroom. So I'm like trying to shield my body against the coffee machine, like thinking that will stop the noise of the grinder or whatever. But the house that we moved into, there's our floor with the kitchen and then the bedroom is upstairs. In the previous house, like I couldn't get up early or risk waking her up, and I couldn't go work out upstairs because the baby's upstairs and the workout space is right next there. So one of us basically always had to compromise. And so nobody's ever like super happy there. In the new house, when we were looking, I was like, I need a space where like I can get up early without interrupting the rest of the house. And that's been a big impact. So I'm not telling you to move house. I'm saying like, it's the same thing as like, don't have soda in your house if you don't want to drink soda, or make it more difficult. I remember my mom brought over some European chocolates one time and I couldn't stop eating them. And I had a broken collarbone. And I remember I just threw them up to the top of the cupboard because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to reach them there. I just was like, yeah,
Toss
this
them
is the
up.
last one and there's no other option. So I am constantly like doing little tricks to make the bad things harder to do and the things I want to do easier to do. And I think if you're looking at what habits you want to create for yourself, figure out what's the friction between the good habits and how do you add friction between the bad habits. So for me, like getting up early, I want to put my workout clothes in the room next door to our bedroom so that I can get up and not shuffling around the bedroom trying to figure out what to wear. I already know what I have to wear and I can get up early, put that on, and then go work out.
Walk in there, yeah.
Whereas I realize I've been on my phone too much, and I actually find an app that will block apps from me during the workday, which has helped a lot. But then I also have a little lockbox that has a timer on it, and you put your phone in there and you can not get into this box until the timer is up. And that's another thing I do because I can't trust myself to like not pick up my phone. And so those are just small examples of just, again, you can try your best, but then also just make it difficult to do the bad things when you don't want to.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. Definitely would recommend people read Atomic Habits. It's fantastic. Goes into all detail on this, and also check out the Tim Ferriss episode with James Clear. That was a fantastic episode. Really enjoyed that. Yeah, I think it makes so much sense. You just got to make the things you don't want to do hard to do, and the things that you do want to do easy to do. I need to do some of those things. Like the phone thing. It's really interesting. Like self-awareness. I recognize that my fuse is the shortest with my son. It's like when I'm rushing or when I'm looking at my phone, right? Like, because I feel bad. I shouldn't be looking at my phone and I feel bad about it. And then I react, which is not great. But when I just don't have my phone around, like if I wake up in the morning and I just don't look at my phone for a while, totally different experience.
Yeah.
Totally different.
I find the same thing if I'm like on social media too much. I just feel it's like empty calories almost, where I'm just like, oh, like junk in my brain. And I feel I'm much less creative when I've just been on that. And I'm also more mindful. I still hold my phone in front of my daughter, but like I'm trying to be better at being more present. Like when I'm with her, because when I first had her, I'm like dealing with the sales stuff and there's a lot going on. And I find myself like trying to do two things at once, which doesn't happen. It's just like, oh yeah, I'll work when the baby sleeps. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing with like working out. But every time I get to the place where I'm working out, about to start, the baby wakes up.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like a consistent amount of time. So you really need to be setting yourself up for success in that way. Okay. So Cathryn, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about financial independence. This podcast is all about crafting a life you love and making work optional using the tools of mindfulness, financial independence, and envisioning. You have taken the path of entrepreneurship to pursue financial independence. Would love to hear a little bit about your journey building Best Self and how you think about personal finance and investing and all of that.
Yeah. So like I said, when I started Best Self, I started as like a passion project that I thought I wanted to see exist. I didn't know it was going to be as big as it was, which I think was good because I probably would have been scared if I knew what I was getting into. And then Best Self started as a very type A productivity focused company. Like, oh, how do we hit our goals? How do we manage our day? Which is great. But I think what I realized a couple of years in was I named it Best Self because I didn't want to call it the Self Journal Company because I was thinking bigger picture, like more products, what would they be? And so it was a big enough umbrella that it would allow us to do more. But at the start, it was like Best Self. And then your best self was your most productive self. And then in 2017, we won the Build a Bigger Business competition, like business going great. But my personal life, I was getting separated and I hit all these goals. Yeah, my personal life was a shambles. And so that was when I first was like, wait, I almost felt like a hypocrite because I'm running this company Best Self, but my relationship is in my personal life, it's not where it should be. And I felt disingenuous in a way of pretending everything's amazing when actually like the awards are great, but like, oh, I wasn't sharing it with anyone. I was burned out and miserable. And so that's when the team would have a joke that best self would just take a form of whatever I was going through life wise. So I went from like, okay, best self should probably expand its outside of just productivity, because I'm seeing like your best self doesn't mean your most productive self, because you could be hitting all your goals and you're not actually happy. And so then I started like, okay, never learned at school like how to cultivate relationships and how to really work on relationships. I didn't know that was a thing. And so I started studying a lot of relationships. We hired relationship experts to just figure out how to never get divorced again, essentially. And then we started expanding the best self products into, okay, what are like small frameworks and tools that we can create for our customers that would help them with their relationships in a way that's almost like a Trojan horse for personal development. It seems like a game, which is where the intimacy deck came in, but it actually is a tool for them in bringing them closer. And that worked out really well. So we went into more relationships, and it was like, okay, relationships, like building your personal network, and then your relationships with your kids. That really felt like we were hitting more on what it really means to be your best self, because before it was like most people have a recipe for a fine life. It's not a great life, but it's like fine. You're not going to complain about it, but you're not like excited to wake up in the morning. And for many reasons, it's because like when we're growing up, we're asked like, oh, what are you going to be when you grow up? Everything's very focused around like what you're going to be and what you're going to work at. That's why you ask people, oh, what do you do? And I think that relationships and like that culture is way more important to our actual happiness, but we don't put any focus on it. And actually, the longest study ever by Harvard followed people over 30 or 40 years to see like it was a happiness study. And the people with the deepest relationships actually lived the longest. And that's with best self where we end up getting to. So yes, we'll teach you how to be productive, but we also don't want you to give up your family and your relationships for this thing that we grow up thinking is the most important thing. Because, you know, everyone that's successful, like, well, I made all this money and realized it wasn't the thing I was looking for, which is great when you have money. But when you're poor, it's like, yeah, but I would like that money. And so I think financial independence and like that freedom, it's like making sure that yes, you want to make money, but then also money shouldn't be the end goal. Money shouldn't be like, this is the only thing. It should be a score on a scoreboard along with the other parts of your life, like your health, your relationships with your significant other, with your kids. And then money is just another thing that you're tracking without it being the only thing that you're tracking.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And that's how this podcast came about and really looks to craft a life you love, right? That's the point. It's not like hit this number and then everything in your life will be great, because as you just said, people make more money than they can spend in 10 lifetimes and still aren't happy. And so there are a lot more aspects to building wealth, right? There's health and relationships and all sorts of things. There's a whole different suite of things that we can consider when we think about crafting a life we love. So I think that really makes a lot of sense. So tell me, as you pivoted to a little bit more holistic best self rather than just focus on productivity, how that kind of changed your personal life and also the business. Because before you made that pivot, sounds like you weren't thriving in the personal life. And that kind of brought about this need to look at a different way of doing things.
Yeah, my life, if I compare it to where it was in 2017, is like so much better now because I'm remarried, way more involved. I definitely put my previous relationship on the back burner while I was building the business, which I don't think it was the right relationship anyway. But for a long time, it's easier. Like you're focused on the business, you focus on all the things until you ignore it anymore, and then you deal with it. And now I'm much more balanced in my work and relationships. And so with Best Health, I don't think we would have survived as a company had we stayed productivity only, mainly because like the world was different. I think the world, especially with the pandemic, people became less hustle culture and like working 24/7 and more focused on their relationships because they're stuck in the house with their significant other that they haven't spent any significant time with because they're both working and busy all the time. And so I think a lot of people got a ton of value out of our products. I think we have over 1,000 5-star reviews on products and getting people saying, oh, we were close to divorce. And then we just started doing this, like literally just talking asking each other these questions 15 minutes a night, and it completely shifted our relationship. Because a lot of times, if you've been in a relationship for a while, like you can't ask your partner some of the questions on these cards, because then their voice, like, well, why is she asking me this? What does she know? Is she thinking I'm doing this? What's going on? And you have this whole inner monologue of what it means to be asked this question. Whereas when you have this card deck, it takes away a lot of that inner monologue, because they're not asking what the card is. And so that small shift actually lifts a lot of defense mechanisms that might otherwise be there.
That's really interesting, right? I bought the intimacy deck for my wife for Christmas, and we've done it once. I think I need to make more time because it was amazing, right? But I think just like finding the time to me feels like, oh, it's going to be work. I don't know if it feels like work. I don't know. Maybe this is.
Just put it on the dining table when you're eating dinner, when your kids aren't around, and see. I like that. Or just you're like, okay, we'll do 3 cards.
Have it in view.
Yeah.
It's like what we're talking about, the habits, right?
Yeah.
You want to use it, don't put it in a cupboard
that you never go to. That's why you'll never use it.
That's a good
If your
point.
self-journal sitting next to you at the desk, then you'll use it. If it's in a box in your closet, you're not going to use it.
Very good point. Yeah, you're so right. Like when you ask a question, there's so much on both sides that comes with it. But when you just pull it randomly out of a deck and they see you do it, it's just a card. And you can answer it or you don't have to answer it. But it takes all of that away. I think that is so genius.
Yeah. And I think it just allows people to be closer. And if you've been together a long time, sometimes it's just harder to broach conversations in a way that maybe it's something that's been touchy in the past. Like my coach in my old gym, him and his wife used this product. They didn't know it was mine until like they got to know me more. And they're like, wait, we've been using that product the whole way through the pandemic. And I guess it was some touchy subject that they never talked about. Their whole relationship was like, oh, we don't talk about that. And then a card from the deck like came up and it was about whatever the topic was. And they're like, fuck it, we'll just talk about it. Because neither one of them was the one to bring it up. I'm not sure if I can swear, but I just did.
Yeah,
so
sure.
there we go.
It's all good.
And then it was like lifted because again, you're removing this defensive thing that you've both built up over time because the card asked you to just blame it.
And the whole meaning attached is not there because
the story that you've created, that means no longer exists.
Exactly, which is probably made up in the first place. Yeah, that's great. And as you built this business, getting back to the idea of financial independence, you recently sold this business, right? I imagine that was a financial success for you. How are you thinking about, you've reached this point, you have financial success, you said you want to maybe start something again. Like, how are you thinking about that whole thing? And maybe you're in a place where you don't need to work for a while or ever again. How do you think about that?
I love working and I like having a purpose of something to do. So I never thought, I'm going to sell this and I'm going to go retire. I'm trying to use the time post sale to figure out and learn new things for myself and then see what comes up. But I think the whole thing is, it's like find something you love and then never work a day sort of thing. Like for me, because I enjoy creating things, I love learning. I know I'll start something because I won't be able to help myself, but I'm not in a rush to start anything. Like I don't have to start something right now. I do know in the next probably 6 to 12 months, I'll probably have an idea that I want to start, but I have ideas all the time. I think when I started Best Self, it wasn't like I thought this was going to be a 7.5 year thing. And so now I'm like, okay, what would I be? And I was passionate about Best Self and our products, but I also didn't think like, oh, this is what I'm going to be spending the next 10 years on. And so I'm thinking whatever idea I come up with next, there'll be something I can't stop working on rather than like I have ideas all the time, but I'm not like, oh, I have to go and work on it right now. I think whenever I come up with the next thing, it's going to be like that feeling of like not being able to help myself. And again, for me, the life I love is just like working on projects that I love. And like, I don't have a desire to like sit on a beach and do nothing. I'm not built to be like a stay-at-home mom either. So I like having projects for myself. And then I want to have like quality time with my daughter. But I definitely need to have projects that I'm working on that are just for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I'm glad you went into that. Yeah. The way I think about financial independence, retire early, it's not that either. It's not sit on the beach and do nothing. It's not work. It's not achieving that so I don't have to work. It's more of getting the money part figured out so I can pursue projects, I can pursue business from a place of sufficiency and enough rather than a place of scarcity and forcing and this needs to work or I can't put food on the table. Because back when we were doing the foundation, that was the mentality I had. And I had a lot of messed up mindsets during that time where it's like, I thought I need to make this work so that I can leave Google because success means leaving Google. Really, success meant building a business, but there was just that forcing feeling, right? And that's what I want to avoid. So I want to get the money situation sorted out so that I can just create from a place of because I want to, because I am so curious about it, I can't stop working on it.
Yeah. And I think even since the sale, I've hit some scarcity moments because there was always like, oh, when you have business, you have money coming in. And when you don't have the business anymore, you have a pile of money, but it's getting smaller the more, like if you're spending it. And so for me, I had never had more money in my bank account, but I was also like, oh my God, there's not more coming in. And there's also not, oh, I can sell this asset when I want. And now I don't have that, which is funny. And I've heard other friends who sold businesses that have had the same, like it's irrational in a lot of ways, but it's there. And I think I've always had like, oh, I always know what the next thing is. Like even when I was at architecture school, like I started my first job like 2 days after I graduated. A lot of my friends took the summer off and I was like, and then moving to New York. Like I always had the next thing figured out because there was some overlap with this or whatever. And this is the first time where I haven't had anything. And I'm just trying to enjoy the time of not setting these crazy expectations. And then also just like I'm learning how to code right now, which has been super fun and actually is like hurting my brain some days, which I haven't done anything that's done that for a while. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Just trying to work different muscles and be open to what comes up. Yeah.
Yeah. And cool. I feel like I'm just building skills so I'll be ready for the next thing.
Got it.
I think of life like a video game where you're just going up in different areas so that when you come across something, you have all these skills that you've built up over time.
Got it. Yeah. A couple more questions. So I know you were pretty into crypto, right? Were you pretty into crypto?
Yeah.
Are you still into crypto? What are your thoughts on the crypto and NFT space?
Oh, if you think the crypto space moves fast, you haven't looked at NFTs. NFTs is like crypto on steroids.
What? Sorry, can you say it again?
If you think the crypto space moves fast, like NFTs, you just cannot take a break. I have a friend who I got into crypto and then he got into NFTs and he's like now a huge influencer of NFTs and has a business in it, but it's just like on constantly. I still believe in crypto. I think I first got into it in like 2017, 2016, but in 2020, I got really into it when DeFi first started and I saw a ton of value and I still have, I think it's awesome. I have seen like, there's a lot of bad actors in it and I put a bad taste in my mouth because it felt like every day there was another scam. And so I took a step back. I'm like, it's hard to trust anyone in this space at this point because you like FTX like explodes because they're doing a bunch of shady stuff. And so it left a bad taste in my mouth and I took a step away, but I still have money in crypto. Think it's definitely an asset to have something in. You don't have to put your whole net worth into it.
Wouldn't be the best idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I just remember seeing you be very into it for a while. And then, yeah, obviously everyone's less into it than they were before. Because
it's great when it's just printing money.
Right. Yeah.
I remember in 2020, e-commerce was just on hard mode because you have the supply chain issues and just a bunch of stuff going on. That business was on hard mode because I was dealing with a lot of personal business things, and it was just really difficult. Whereas DeFi was like anything you touch turned to gold. And so I'm like, you just print money over here. Over here, it's like such a slog. And
now all that money's gone.
Yeah.
For some people.
Now we're all poor.
Yeah. I just remember my friend, I was talking about this with my wife last night. It's like, my friend was like, oh yeah, you just put in money in Celsius and then it grows at 20%. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, how is that working? He's like, I don't know. If you don't know, it's not a good thing. It's not a good. Okay.
The Ponzi scheme.
It's called a Ponzi scheme. It really is. Yeah. We watched the Bernie Madoff thing on Netflix. It was like, oh yeah, that's what they're doing too.
Yeah. A friend of mine came to me in 2020. He had this thing he was invested in, and it was like he was making like 20% on his money or whatever, or more, maybe 25. And when he's explaining it, and I'm just like, I don't get it. And to be honest, there's been like 4 or 5 times where people have come to me with these business ideas where like, I think empathetic people are better investors because they think of like the person on the other side, like, oh, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. And so I've just been like, yeah, I mean, you can do it, but let me know how it goes. And every time that's happened, it's been either not what they thought or a literal Ponzi scheme.
And it literally went bust. It's crazy. All right. So what are you up to on LinkedIn? What are you up to on Twitter?
Oh, I focus on Twitter mainly. And then I repost
do you just repost?
To LinkedIn.
I kind of see they're all like tweet sized.
Yeah. I'm not good at LinkedIn. I don't know what I'm doing on that platform. So don't do anything I'm doing because I don't know what I'm doing. Twitter is my favorite of the socials. Like I get a ton of value from it. And so that's where I'm more focused on just because I love TikTok for consuming and I'm going to try to create some content on there. But I think in general, people are much more like short form content, like real shorts, TikTok, and then Twitter is just as a written medium. But I think they're also starting videos as well on there.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Just was curious because
what are you up to?
What am I up to?
You're good at the LinkedIn.
Yeah, a little bit. My followers have grown from 1,600 from just like normal business usage to I have 4,200 now. So
nice.
All right, Cathryn. So let's shift gears now into what I call the Mindful Fire Final Four. The first question is about envisioning, which I talk about a ton on the podcast. It's had a huge impact in my life. Would love to hear something that you've envisioned. We've talked about a few things, but maybe tell me about something that you wanted to make happen and you made happen in your life through envisioning.
Yeah, my whole building best self was about setting a goal and hitting it. And it's crazy because my goal with the Kickstarter initially, I didn't publicly share this, but internally was like 200,000 on Kickstarter. And like our public goal was 15,000, but I wanted to hit 200 and we hit 320 something.
Interesting.
And then after that, I think the day the campaign ended, the Shopify announced their Build a Business competition, which is something that I'd seen and it wasn't even close to winning, but it was this thing where I'm like, oh, this would be so cool. And I put a small poster up on my wall. It was just like, we'll win this. Because I'm thinking, okay, best case scenario, I win this. But if it doesn't work out, I'll still have built it. So whatever. But we ended up winning the Build a Business competition. And then one of my goals was to build something that I could sell at some point, which I think is an achievement of just like creating something from nothing and then being able to sell it to someone who finds value in it. And so I think my goal for last year was to do that, which was pretty brave considering I also was having a baby. But yeah, so for me, I'm a big believer in envisioning. I actually have been meaning I need to sit down and figure out what the next vision is because I haven't done that in a bit. And I know when I do that, it works. I just have to figure out what the next big goal is.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, I remember you winning the Build a Bigger Business competition. Did you win it twice?
Yeah.
2 years in a row? And then like, didn't you go to like, what's his name?
Fiji with Tony Robbins.
Yeah, you went to Fiji with Tony Robbins and like we're hanging out with all those high level business people.
I mean, I didn't expect to win it a second time. I never envisioned that, but it did happen. Yeah, it was crazy.
Was awesome. Yeah, it was pretty cool to see all of that. And yeah, I've been super pumped watching your growth and your success. So it's been really fun. All right. So the second question is, what piece of advice would you give to someone early on their path to financial independence?
I would tell someone they are their biggest asset. And so focusing on building up themselves, like build up your network, build up your skill set. And that might look like not taking the best paid job when you're younger and taking one that you'll actually learn way more. And I think a lot of times we think, oh, I should take the one that pays more. But sometimes even I still want to get a job because I would learn so much from this person. And so focus on learning in your younger years because you're going to leapfrog who you would have been if you took a slightly higher paying job, but one that you're really not going to learn a ton. And so I would just treat yourself as the asset that you're building, and then money will come from that.
That is great advice. I really love that. No one has said that before.
That's what I did. So I'm just sharing my recipe.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any money. And I just focused on how do I make myself better? Because it's literally all that I have. And then eventually the money thing will be a byproduct of you becoming a more valuable person because you're creating more value in the world from what you've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Investing in yourself. Yeah, it's something that I'm working on right now. It's a struggle for me to, especially investing like financially, but even just like sticking to healthy habits and things like that. Like thinking about all those things as investments in myself and building myself up, I think is really ultimately the money piece will come. But as we talked about before, it's not the only piece. And health and relationships and all those things are what really matter when it comes to crafting a life you love.
Yeah.
All right. The third question is, what piece of advice would you give to someone getting started with meditation and or mindfulness?
I remember you teaching me how to meditate way back. And for a long time before that, I was like, I just don't think I'm the type of person that can meditate. I don't think I'm deep enough, I believe is the exact quote that I said. And I think I was just looking at it because I couldn't turn my brain off. And it was like, I'd never done this before. So I expected to be an expert the first time I did it. And when I couldn't do it, I guess that's just not the type of person I am. It's Michael Phelps. He's a kid and he like can't swim the first time he gets in the pool. And he's, I guess, because I'm just not a swimmer. And so I think embracing the suck for a while and just knowing that you're not going to be bad at it and your mind's going to go everywhere. And I think for me, that took a while for me to be like, okay, I'm just going to have to get better at this over time. And then also there's different meditation for different people. And I think if you try for a while and it's just like something's not clicking, there's also different styles that you can try. Like I actually find I did like yoga, I find to be a way for your whole body to meditate. And I only figured that out when I went to Thailand and I was doing this 8-day fast thing. And you get massage and you go to yoga and you're not doing any work. And that was the first time my mind's not busy elsewhere doing something. Yeah, what works for you?
Yeah, great advice. And yeah, as you mentioned, like me getting you to meditate that time, I'm coming back to that. Was that in Colorado or was that in Mexico?
No, that I think I told you that over chat or Zoom or something.
Oh, yeah?
And then we did it over Zoom.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I remember us in the room where we had like the speakers and stuff and we all like our little group meditated.
Yeah. And I think that I was just pretending to meditate.
At that time. Okay.
That could have been what drove the conversation.
Yeah. Man, those events were so fun. That was so much fun. All right. The last question, Cathryn, is how can people follow you online, connect with what you're doing, and check out Best Self and maybe buy some of the amazing products that you've created?
Yeah. So you can buy anything that I've talked about on bestself.co. And then you can find me on Twitter, Cathryn Lavery. My blog, website, newsletter is on littlemight.com. And yeah, that's me.
All right. I'll link all of that up in the show notes. And yeah, definitely invite you to go check out Best Self and buy some of the products. They're all wonderful. I have the intimacy deck. I have the self journal, which I'm going to dig up / maybe get a new one and start putting it to work in my own life. But really, I think this conversation's been amazing on just investing in yourself, right? It's all about investing in yourself, in your self-awareness, in your habits, in your vision for the person you want to become. And then just moving towards it little by little.
Yeah. That's pretty much my recipe.
There you go. And it works. It works. Give it a try. And Cathryn, thank you so much for being here. It's been great to connect with you again and to have you share your wisdom with the audience.
Thanks, Adam. It's great being here. I look forward to hearing from people in the audience.
Thanks for joining me on today's episode of the Mindful Fire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I invite you to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this. This just lets the platforms know you're getting value from the episodes and you want to be here when I release additional content. If you're ready to start your Mindful Fire journey, go to mindfulfire.org/start and download my free envisioning guide. In just 10 minutes, this guide will help you craft a clear and inspiring vision for your life. Again, you can download it for free at mindfulfire.org/start. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.